Hi everybody, hope you're well. So I've recently shared on my channel a Christmas piece and I wanted to do like a little walkthrough because I think this could be a pretty good example on how to write music in this kind of style. And we're gonna have a listen to the piece first and then we'll talk about it a little bit. Also, super important, don't skip away. I've hidden in the piece the melody for Santa Claus is Coming to Town and Jingle Bells, and see if you can find them. The first one is kind of easy, the second one not so easy, but I'm gonna show you at the very end of the video where they are. So let's have a listen. So when I say that this could be a good example on how to write music in this kind of style, I mean that the piece makes use of some of the cliches that are oftentimes found in this style of music. And that is true both for the harmony and the orchestration. So the simplest version of the melody sounds like this. And this already makes use of a few of the progressions and cadences that oftentimes we find in this type of music. Like, for example, we have a 4 major going to 2 half diminished, or even something simpler like the progression that we have at the beginning. And the second time through is slightly different. Another variation of these 2 to 4 half diminished I oftentimes used is going from a 4 major 7 to a 4 minor major 9. And the piece is gonna reference a little bit of jazz harmony as well. And oftentimes when I'm going from a 5 chord to 1, I tend to do this kind of suspension, going to like a tension chord and then resolve it on a major 7. Or even something like this. And throughout the piece, I'm going to be making use of all these kind of concepts that we talked about and using them in a few different places and just mixing them up in interesting ways, just to make the piece a little bit more interesting and hopefully engaging for the people who are listening to it. Now that this is out of the way, let's talk about the orchestration a little bit. For this kind of style of music, we tend to have, those twinkly sounds like celeste and harp and glockenspiel and tubular bells and sleigh bells, of course, which we can't possibly miss. And right off the bat, I'm starting the piece with this kind of orchestration just to, get the vibe straight. And also as part of the accompaniment, I've used a little bit of strings tremolo. And also a little bit of oboe and French horns. And after this, we swell into like some kind of bridge that I used throughout the entire piece to essentially go from one section to the other. For this, we have the melody on strings, essentially, with some pizzicato on basses and tremolo on viola. And we have the very same thing basically mirrored on tuned percussion, like glockenspiel, tubular bells, celeste and harp, and the things that we talked about before. And for the harmonic support, we basically have brass with French horns playing some short triplets and trombones playing some accents. The first version of the melody is played on cellos and is harmonized by the rest of the string section on the second half, and we have basses on playing some short notes. We have again brass for the accompaniment, with trombones and tuba playing the very same rhythm as the basses. And we have tubular bells and celeste accenting some of the melody notes. For the following section, we essentially go back to the same bridge that we had before, but we now have woodwinds playing the main melody and strings joining on the second half. And we have again all those twinkly percussion stuff essentially doubling the melody for this section, and it's always gonna be like that pretty much throughout the entire piece. And the way we're transitioning from this section to the following, which is essentially a different version of the same melody that we listened before, is going to be through a few of those jazzy chords and cadences that we listened before. So let's have a listen to that. And on top of this, we have brass passing the same kind of rhythm to each other. For the following part, we have violins and violas taking the melody, harmonized in very close voices, but also pizzicato basses on the root and fifth of the chords, and cellos, pizzicato, playing some offbeats dyads. And I think I've talked about this specific orchestration before, when you have the melody harmonizing such close voices, it's important to double it with something else just to make it pop a little bit more. So for that, I've used woodwinds essentially, and bassoons are filling out the harmony. And the second half of the melody is getting a little bit more complex with some counter voices between tuba and French horns. Let's have a listen. And strings and woodwinds are essentially mirroring some of the parts that we just listened to. Okay, after this we are going to the B section of the piece, which is based on what we had before, but it has a more minor kind of vibe. On the woodwinds we have a run played on the harmonic minor scale, and then we have clarinets arpeggiating the chords and flutes and oboes playing some minor triads. And the strings are essentially just playing a pedal tune, both very high on violins, playing harmonics, and very low on basses and cellos. Now, nothing, in my opinion at least, sounds more Christmassy than the Nutcracker. So what I basically did for the following part is just ripping off the Sugar Plum Fairy. And for that, we of course have Celeste and some pizzicato strings. Also, very iconic, we have this kind of embellishment on bass clarinet. Of course, I've used different notes, but it's the same kind of thing. And the second half of the section is pretty much the very same thing, harmonically at least. And in terms of the orchestration is essentially building to what is coming after. So we have some spiccatos on strings. We have the rest of the tune percussion. And we also have bassoons and bass clarinets at the very bottom, and clarinets playing, doubling the melody very high in the register. After this, we have yet another build-up. And for this, I'm basically using just two chords in different inversions. This is an A minor going to an F minor. And this keeps moving higher and higher in register, just creating tension. And brass are basically part of the accompaniment. So after this minor kind of parenthesis, I wanted to get back to the original major vibe that we had at the beginning of the piece. So this is what we have. Let's have a listen to percussion first. And strings are basically playing some embellishments. After this part, we're going back to the bridge, and this is now the third time that is happening, I believe. We now have trumpets on the chords and woodwinds on the melody. And we have some short notes on violins first, and then they take over the melody on the second half. And of course we have our usual twinkly stuff on tuned percussion. The trumpet part that we had on the first half gets passed to the French horns, and the rest of the brass section is essentially playing some accents again. Cool, so after this we go back to the main melody again, which we haven't heard in a while. And for this we have violins and violas playing in close harmony again. Same trick as before, we have flutes, clarinets and oboes doubling the melody into octaves just to make it a little bit more clear. And brass is basically playing the accompaniment with trombones in open chords and some short notes on French horns. On the long sustained note that you just heard, I've basically layered the bridge part, like a variation of the bridge part that you can hear on woodwinds. Those fast-moving triplets that before we had on French horns are now passed to the low brass section together with low strings. And after this, I was basically trying to build back to the bridge. Okay, woodwinds are basically doubling the melody as well. And we have strings doing the build-up together with percussion. Okay, after this we're basically ending with the bridge again. And we have, again, woodwinds on the melody, but they're now very, very high in their register. And that is why it's cutting through so much. French horns and trombones are basically accompanying the melody, and we have trumpets doubling the woodwinds. And let's have a listen to the strings. For the first couple of bars, we have violins on a pedal tone, and then they take over the melody. And violas are playing some tremolos, and we have pizzicato on basses again. And then we have the usual twinkly percussion bits, doing accents and doubling the melody as well. And finally, I wanted to end the piece in a similar way that I started it. So I basically ended up doing something on piano with some strings accompaniment. Cool. Now, let's get to the thing we've all been waiting for. I'm going to show you where I've hidden those two little Christmas tunes. So here's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. It comes right after the big build-up, going from A minor to F minor. It's on bassoons. Let's have a listen to everything together. Okay, that was quite easy, I think. And the second one was Jingle Bells. I think it was pretty hard. I don't think anybody could have possibly recognized this. It's very well hidden in the piano part and in some of the strings part, I'll show you. And that is also on the first violin. Cool. So I'm wishing you all a Merry Christmas and wonderful New Year, hopefully better than the one that just came. And let's have a listen to the full piece and then we're done.